morning, everyone, and welcome to the 7th of September. The podcast today is going to be part 2 of our September theme on grief and loss. So today we're going to carry on with more information, more reminders from It's Okay, You're Not Okay. Then next week, we're going to start from How to Carry What Can't Be Fixed. Now, we're not going to plagiarize the book, but I'm going to draw pretty heavily on it as though Megan is a guest, but she's a guest through her book. She couldn't work it out in her schedule to join us. Then the 21st, we have Sean Leonard coming, and Sean's contribution is going to be more about the reality of what a very unique, profound gift that he has taught him. Nobody has to believe it, all right? It is information that I offer for you to consider, especially when things are happening and you're in a state of grief and you don't really have a clear understanding of what some of these connections might be. For instance, an open mind is the best solution to the best options you give yourself. You increase the options you give yourself when realistically you open your mind to the possibility there could be more than can be proven in black and white, all right? And then the final week of September is going to be finishing up some of the strategies that work, just so that when a person is inundated and overwhelmed by grief, it's a profound experience, as we all know, and it's one that we go through more than once. So just kind of like an FYI reminder of, here are some things that have worked for many, many other people. And if you don't have a better idea of what you need to do about the feelings and the reactions and the costs of grief, then start with this and then fine tune it according to your own needs. Okay, so Megan Devine, just want to credit her, the author of the 2 books, It's Okay That You're Not Okay, and How to Carry What Can't Be Fixed, asks a really important question. And that's a question that I believe all of us, grieving or not, should ask ourselves. The question is, and this really, write this one down, all right? What is the cost of avoiding grief? Because there is one. Last week in our podcast, we talked about a very familiar theme in most of our cultures. I certainly have experienced, and I'd be very surprised if you haven't or you don't. The theme and the pressure in the search of happy endings. We somehow have made reality or added an expectation and a belief. We've entrenched it, I believe, in a belief, and it has permeated our culture that all things, if you're successful, should have a positive and happy ending, like somehow life is a Disney movie. All right? And on top of that, actually believing that it's possible that we, in this state, as we move through it, can actually fix most things. Why? Why would we believe that? Because we have joined in, or we have been pressured, or we have been influenced, or somehow we've picked up some message that in pursuit of a happy ending means getting over grief. Really? And in that process, fixing We fix ourselves like there's something wrong, there's something broken, there's something abnormal. My message to you is, as it has always been about any issue, rather than trusting and respecting how you feel, your body, your mind, your spirit are always trying to heal us. All right. So give them options, for heaven's sakes. In the work, your body, your mind, your spirit are always trying to give you that advantage and that boost. Give them more options. That's all I'm saying. And consider that there might be things that we could know more about, and use some, any, all, none of. Options are the answer. Because somehow the alternative to that would be, if you don't just buck up, whatever you're feeling is voluntary. Now you're getting blamed for it because you're not doing it right. All right? Really? That means necessarily, I believe, that if we adhere to that belief, that prescriptive, then is it not saying, am I the only one who draws the conclusion from that that must mean that we're the cause of our ongoing feelings of grief? Because you're not doing it right. You're not meeting the milestones. Really? You're not a 4-year-old, okay, trying to learn to read and write. You're an adult human being with profound experience of living, and you've been dealt a blow. All right. Another belief is that our grief continues. All right. It will continue because you're not doing it right, and it will continue beyond what is culturally accepted as normal. And if that is true, if you don't meet those milestones, if people or physician, I mean, even medical doctors, all right, will give a message that is culturally saturated with. When it goes on too long, or it becomes inconvenient, then we have to medicalize it. All right. We must have problematic or pathological grief. And that the normal feelings of grief as we experience them, and anybody here hasn't found this to be true, I'll be surprised, but put your hand up if you know. I've never had that, is that grief comes in waves. It's sort of like the tide going out, then the tide comes in. The tide goes out, the tide comes in. Luckily, over time, usually, it doesn't come in as high. But there will be things that remind you. There will be anniversaries. There will be other setbacks where you just wish that you could have that person physically available to you. All right. And know that the process is okay. All right. That we have unique needs. Each individual here has unique needs in how they need to want to express their grief. And those follow the given relationship that we've had with the person who's gone. All right. And it's perfectly okay. That's perfectly okay. Your grief may be different depending on different relationships. And it doesn't mean that it's unresolved. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're stuck and that it's a considerable time in the future where you feel, you know what, I'm just not getting past this. Be guided by your own feelings. All right. I believe what we need to do is we need to redefine what that word unresolved really means, and not bandy about terms that pathologize the normal process of what I consider transitioning. All right. As when we physically lose access to a loved one. Isn't that really more what's happening? That we, even if we didn't have the opportunity to see that person a lot, if maybe they were at a distance or for one reason or another, for periods they were unavailable to us, we knew they were physically there. We knew it was an option, and we've become very dependent on that physical access. And when we lose that with a person, or really anything else that's really important to us, buying on for what has become our cultural norm, well, not just our Anglo-Saxon, this covers a lot of different cultures as well. That belief also fosters the belief that we're more in charge of events in our world than it's actually possible for us to be. And I think that's a double hit, because then not only are we not receiving what we need from others, right? We're now judging ourselves and putting internally an extra pressure that we should be more in control. Who created that myth? There's a Harvard Medical School psychologist named Susan David who observed that our culture, and I think this is really quite true if you look around you. Okay, our cultural dialogue is fundamentally avoidant. What does that mean? That's like a $20 phrase for translated. That means that we resist the validity, the truth, and the authenticity of things we don't want to look at. All right. And it's not hard to believe that it's especially true with something that is so personal, unique to us, the way we grieve, and the condition that we as human beings, vulnerable human beings, find ourselves in when we are in the process of transitioning through our own personal grief and loss for whatever the losses are we've had. All right. Okay, when we're in that transition, we're actually in search, I believe, of peace and acceptance after the physical loss of access to someone that we really love and we really want in that form, because that is what we have become used to. That's what we've become dependent on. So what really needs to change then? I offer you for your consideration that it has to start with us. Okay, not accepting the additional burden of how our culture is most likely to express its expectations about the way we move forward to its drumbeat, not allowing us our unique needs around things like very physical, temporal, real things like enough time, enough space to process and rebuild after what's probably the most common human experience universally among all of us. Every single one of us on the face of this earth will experience grief and loss. And every single one of us on the face of this earth needs to express that grief and that loss in our own way. So that we don't hurt ourselves and we don't hurt others as well. All right? We're not weak or inadequate, and there is no question that there's something abnormal with us. It's our right and very human need to feel the feelings, the very human need we have to, and our reactions as well. All right? Our goal shouldn't be to try to get better. Right? This is not a physical experience. Well, it has physical components, certainly, but it's not something physically like the flu. All right. And Megan Devine, bless her heart, all right, so eloquently put it, grief and loss is not a sickness. Grief and loss is not a sickness. All right. Here's the other one, just while you're at it. Hafsa, can you put the titles of the books in the chat box? Thanks. I want to underscore from my clinical practice that how could it be your fault? How could it be your inadequacy, your deficiency, you're doing it wrong, when it's, as I said, one of the most common experiences all humans will have. Actually, all living things will have. Little story, it has to be so normal. We had a cat that had a bit of a personality disorder. And we had a dog that was a pushover. It was a golden retriever. And that cat loved that dog like it was a litter mate, much to the embarrassment of the dog. And when that dog died, now we're not talking about cats and dogs specifically grieving, just how human, it's not even human, how living thing this is. That cat sat out on the dog's grave for 3 days and wouldn't eat or drink or come in. And we'd go out and bring the cat in, and the cat would be right back on the grave. A year later, after the dog died, we were unpacking Christmas decorations and things. And somehow there was the dog's bone. I don't know how the dog's bone got in with the Christmas decorations. The dog probably dumped it in while we were packing it. And the cat found the bone and grabbed it, wrapped its back and front legs around it and rolled and did the marking thing and mewed. And you think you could get that bone away from that dog, from that cat? No, I'm just saying it's a living thing. This is a living entity experience. So please be really respectful of your own needs. All right. So let's have a look at it, at the deeper question. And that is at the high cost of denying grief in all its forms. When we suppress pain for long enough, know this, there's a due date for paying the cost personally. And when we feel the need that isn't our own, based on expectation, based on wanting to pass, based on not wanting to promote or prompt other people intruding on our mental state and us having to explain or, you know, go through the story again. And sometimes you just don't want to do that. Be vigilant, all right? Because there is a due date for paying the cost of pain suppressed. When we project that outer appearance of happiness, especially when we don't feel it, despite the fact that others at times will need us to feel happier, all right, happy enough so that they can feel more comfortable around us, so that it doesn't feel to them like it's all about us all the time. In doing this, we're being false to ourselves. I can't speak for you, but I know personally, the pain doesn't actually go away. After sufficient time, unique to you, personal to you, you may find, I offer it if you do, for whatever use you can make of it, there's kind of a dull ache in the background. There's like, I don't know, she's gone. But she's gone she's not gone, all right? She's gone in the form I want her to be here. And nothing, getting to the point of acceptance that You can beat your head against a stone wall. Nothing's going to bring her back in the form I want her to be here. And is that true for you? Okay. In It's Okay, You're Not Okay, Megan says, she describes something that we've all seen, and that's that the pain continues when you suppress it, when you camouflage it for the convenience of others, or to avoid them intruding, when you just really want to be alone with it in your own mind. All right, you want to take a rest. All right. The pain continues to demand to be heard when you try to camouflage it. And it will continue to be heard in any way it can. Things like grocery shopping. All right. I remember when my father passed, and it was a profound loss. It was the first loss, really. And I can remember my father was in National Defense Medical Center because he had acquired brain injury from stroke. And I would go to the fresh fruit and veg market, and I would get these big oranges because he loved them. And I'd bulk up on those, and I would bring them and peel them and give him a pinky. And, you know, it was sort of a little love ritual. And of course, I hadn't read Megan's book, and I was a lot younger and less ornery. And I decided that I need to put my public face on. Well, I ended up in the grocery store, and I was doing pretty good down the veg aisle. But when I got to the fruit aisle, I started to feel a little bit shaky, just like, okay, wait a minute. Can't quite get my breath. And I wasn't in a panic attack or anything. But when I came upon the oranges, that was the end of the game. All right. It was like, get me out of here. You know, more. And he's standing there looking like, huh? That woman just like, she's crazy, just out of the clear blue. She was smiling a little while ago. And okay, when you try to pass, you are exacting a price on yourself. All right. And when we're not true to ourselves, doesn't mean you go into the fruit and veg store bawling and crying. And it doesn't mean that. It just means when you allow yourself to feel what you feel, all right, and you're true to yourself. And here's another one. Megan didn't say this, but I'm saying it. That is, also require and expect that others will respect your truth as well. They don't have to agree with it, but they do have to give you the time and space you need when you need it, so that you can transition without a head trip, frankly, being put on you. All right. We often express this additional cost when we try to pass, or we try to meet others' expectations, like increased substance use. And it could be, I'm not talking about illegal things necessarily, just things that were, it's never, on your best day, it's not a good idea to have that many glasses of wine or that many whatever, and you're making a habit of it, and it's the thing that gets you through, or whatever. And that the lack of being truthful to yourself, of being entitled to just tell yourself the truth about how you feel. All right. Don't tell me that doesn't, even if you don't have anxiety, don't anybody out there say that makes you feel better. All right. It doesn't. It increases your latent anxiety. You do that long enough. All right. You have a little niggling attachment of depression and social isolation, when really you don't need isolation. What you really need is respectful companionship. It's important to recognize our pain. It's also important to develop some skills that make you be still truthful to yourself, but more capable of also living your life at the same time. Be willing to witness and respect both your need for grief and loss time and your need for today is the 7th of September, my real lifetime. All right, in ourselves, and engage instead in whatever is most available to you in good, sound, kind, patient self-care. And that will help you to remain as present as it's possible to be in everyday life, while still navigating through our grief. First for ourselves, and then by claiming the space that we need with others who are willing and sorting out. It's okay to sort out. All right. This is not a time to major in manners. This is a time to be true to yourself and seek out loving kinship. And you know loving kinship when it gives you a space, a place, and someone to feel safe and understood with. Okay? Sharing the truth about when we're asked, how are you doing? That is not something that when you're grieving and you're in a state of loss, you necessarily are obliged to repeat, because the person is intruding on a time perhaps when you're claiming peace of mind or just a step out of the storm. All right. Sometimes it's just catching your breath and taking a step out of the storm. Another thing I would really like to thank Megan Devine for is confronting one of the biggest mistruths that I believe exists and is so often hauled out and offered to us when we're grieving. I don't know, in some misguided attempt to make us feel better. And that's I'll call it a parable, all right? All right, that all things must happen for a reason. Really? Poppycock and balderdash. All right, that's what I think of that. What a supreme reach out of the realm of truth into orbit, all right? Things happen, stuff happens. That's a fact of life. There is no corollary that they happen for a good reason or a reason at all. They happen because of a series of events. There probably is a linear process where that event was highly likely to happen, and there's no part of that that should be offered to us as, well, you know, and that there's no reasonable indicator either that every single thing happens for a positive reason. And when we're gutted by grief or reclaiming some ongoing traction back to our own life, there is no concept that we should see the positive in this loss. Yes, but here's the positive side of it. That's really something that people, in a desperate attempt to try to make you feel better, frankly, step off the cliff. Because that is the last thing you need to hear. All right. And it's not positive. All right. What we need instead is help. We do need help because it's a stormy, turbulent time. All right. That jumps on us and then abates and jumps on us. We need help instead to be willing to be with the pain. Just be with it. And to witness it for ourselves quietly, authentically, in what we choose to say and in what we choose to do. There is no right and wrong way to feel or behave. If you are not hurting yourself or hurting somebody else deliberately, there is no right or wrong way to feel or behave. Kind, gentle patience with yourself. You or I don't move through different stages of grief in a linear way. We don't. That is not what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross meant on Death and Dying, all right? And we certainly don't move through it at some externally dictated pace. There is no right or wrong. And when we put that brave face on, and when we avoid what we must do to establish the appearance of our new normal, okay, we're getting better, we're moving forward, we can get stuck. Being a phony about your most essential feelings and thoughts can lead you to a state of not being as in tune with what your real needs are. If you don't know what your real needs are, you can't get them met, not by yourself or anybody else. And remember what I say about every issue that troubles you, all right? Accept no substitutes. Be quiet with yourself. Find a serene, quiet hug of a space where you can just be with the pain and ask it, what do I need? Right now, what do I need? All right. Where is it? And how do I get enough of it to make enough of a difference right this moment? Okay. And then, because when you don't do that, all right, it's a little bit like being a car trying to get out of mud. You're stuck, all right? And you just end up spinning your wheels, all right? If you spin your wheels, where are you headed? You are not headed to any place you ever wanted to be, let alone at a time when you've been sideswiped by grief and loss. You end up on some increased level of depression. You do it long enough. Anxiety, for sure, universally exhausted. And when you're constantly meeting the needs and expectations of your surrounding, rather than just harboring and catching your breath and doing what you need for yourself in grief and loss, is there anybody out here who is exempt from anger? This is not a time when anger is a mobilizing emotion. Anger, that depression, anxiety, exhaustion, to whatever degree you create for yourself by not being authentic, ends up having you feel abandoned, even more alone than you were through the physical loss of access to that person you love and want. And by connection with feeling not worthy, not worth, okay, genuine understanding at a time you need it most. And not any old support, but meaningful support, all right? And if time has passed, even if this is not a recent loss, this stays with you. Ask yourself this, if you're here today because of a longer ago loss that is still right with you, it's interfering, it's interrupting your days, that's okay. All that means is that you didn't receive the understanding, the support. You didn't give yourself permission, time and space and patience, all right? You didn't get what you needed then, and you're still not receiving them. This is an opportunity. This whole month of podcasts, I'm hoping if you're in that, even if you've got a historical loss, even if it's a loss that doesn't necessarily involve another human, could be a pet, it could be anything that was really profoundly important to you. It could be your health. It could be anything. All right. I want this to be the stepping off point this month of saturation of great information and opportunity around any grief and loss. I want this to be your stepping off point for what do I need? What do I still need? Where is it? All right. Email me and we can make subsequent podcasts on topics that are meaningful for you. All right. So ask yourself that question. What do you need? And if you still need them now, all right, especially if you're kind of stuck in a loop about you don't know what to do about it, then I seem to be quoting her a lot today. As Megan reminds us, really, in all of those losses, probably the one thing we did want, okay, is safety from the storm inside through love and connection. And I'm hoping that when Sean comes, the one thing you will take away from it on the 21st, please be here. Bring any of your friends. We're going to increase the participation component to like 1,000 people if we need to. Get them to subscribe on hoarding.ca so they get an automatic invitation. Anybody suffering residual or current grief and loss, I'm hoping that you take away from Sean's guest offering that love and connection never dies. And our dependence, and it's not against your religion to love and feel connected. All right. That's what the timeline of our life and how we transition through different stages is. All right. And the kinship. There's nothing like feeling that the people who know you best and knew you best in physical form might still be there for you. Just try to open your mind to the possibility that could be more fact than fiction. All right. And when we feel like we're unmoored, all right, what we're really looking for is security of true survival. All right. But permanent, nonstop, never-ending survival, not realistic. In this life, we need a body. All right. That's sort of one of the facts of life, of the stage of our universal existence. All right. Somebody said, okay, in this stage, you got to give them a body, folks. And somebody on the committee said, yeah, but you know what? That's not the best solution, because sooner or later, that body's going to start breaking down mentally, physically, whatever. All right. And so somebody said, well, you know what? Let's create another transition, another timeline where maybe we don't need a body. All right. We still are our energy. You can't create energy and you can't destroy energy, but you can transition energy. This is not a new age theory, all right? This is people a lot smarter than I am said this a long time before I was born. This is a fact. Can't create energy, can't destroy energy. So what does that mean about us? Can that possibly mean, like, just logically, forget the spiritual aspect of it, just logically, scientifically, does that mean that your energy is like kaput because you've drawn your last breath? How can that logically be true? Don't worry about religion. because I don't think religion has a lot to do with the science that you accept. Look into that. Look into it. There may be more to that. All right. I can believe what I believe based on bumping my head long enough, being a stubborn Irish woman. However, you know what? At a certain point, we have to ask ourselves, why would it be different for us? All right. And we were never put on this earth. That's another illogical possibility. With a commitment, with a good solution, with a way to solve anything that is troubling in our life, by lying to ourselves or misrepresenting what's in our own hearts. Really? If you really think about any challenge you've ever had in your life, was that ever a good idea? So why would you do it when you are profoundly affected by something as honest as grief? Why would you ever feel that or accept? I know why you feel it, all right, because the messages are all around you. You only have 5 days off sick leave from work. You only have, well, if that's true and you've got to go back to work, then let's find a way for you to be true to yourself, do your work, get paid, and still do what you need to do for you. And it doesn't involve pretending that we're more in control than we actually are. That will just make us more anxious. Telling the truth to ourselves first, and then respectfully to others with no expectation that they are the answer to it, allows us to connect. And if ever there is a time in our life, all right, where we need to connect in a very odd way, all right, it's a time when we've lost someone we love in a physical access form. It does hurt this much. You're not being a baby. You are not exaggerating it. You're not doing anything abnormal. It does hurt this much because it should hurt this much. All right. And there's not one darn thing wrong with it. Keep that in your mind. Hear it. If you're not comfortable with the way you're expressing it, we can work on fine-tuning that. All right. When we recognize pain and grief as a healthy response to loss, we can give ourselves more compassion and more patience, and we can expect the same and require the same from others. And you don't have to be verbally militant. You can just choose to not be in their presence. Maybe that's an additional thing you just want to take a step out of the storm about, having to explain. All right. And we can respond treating each other, other people who are grieving, who have had loss, to help find safety means to come together with a respectful openness when what has happened to us, all right, can't be made right. Don't be trying to make it right. It can't be made right. Transitioning to acceptance and patience, acknowledgement, being seen and heard and witnessed in our truth. All right, that's love. That's what we need. Where is it? What do you need? You need acknowledgement, being seen and heard and witnessed for the truth about what you're feeling. It's the only real medicine for grief, Megan tells us, and I agree. I didn't even try to go to my clinical experience on that one. That one was a no-brainer. I couldn't have said it better. So if our experience of grief has involved primarily what's most likely, true about our culture, grief and loss, what can we do now about it if we didn't get it back then, or we're not getting it now? We have to take a little bit of a risk. What's it going to cost you? All right. They may not agree with you. They already don't agree with you if they're giving you cheap advice. All right. We have to risk being truthful first. All right. Being truthful first. Who to? All together now. Ourselves. And then requiring that others do not need, and without explanations or more information than we want to provide. All right, you don't have to buy that acceptance. You don't have to buy that compassion. You don't have to buy that inclusion and not being left alone, that simple companionship. Okay, you don't have to buy that by spilling your guts and going over the story again and again and answering their questions, which frankly, how is that going to change their life? Just saying something like, I need a break from the story. I need to just be quiet with it. Thank you for caring enough to ask, but I just am not up. I'm not up to it. Okay? I just am not up to it. And internally, reject the premise, it's a false one, that to be successful and to be healthy, you must be triumphant over grief. Okay, this is not war. This is a natural human transition. You don't need to be transformed. All right, and you are not going to come back better for this experience, stronger. And what poppycock? What poppycock? All right, what a head trip. Maybe the answer is more about finding a middle ground that's real, where you can do whatever your unique work around grief is. All right. Maybe it's more a matter of finding our way to that middle ground, a place that doesn't ask us to deny our grief. All right. And doesn't doom us forever because we're still in it, and sometimes it still visits us. Maybe a place that actually honors the full breadth of grief. Because it's true. It can honor the full breadth of the grief we are going to transition through. Why? Because it's authentically true. All right. And the only choice we have, okay, as we mature, the only choice we have, and we do have a choice. That's why I want to bring you all of this great information. All right. Things beyond my professional. I am not a grief and loss specialist, but I tell you, I know some. And I can bring, if they can't come in person, I can bring you the wisdom of their books, and you can invest in that if that's what you want to. You can also maybe rethink the concept of death and dying and life. And your own life. We're all going to meet. We're all going to be there. All these people, all 37 people today, we're all going to be seeing ourselves on the other side. All right. Okay. So how do we inhabit our vulnerability? Because we are vulnerable. We are vulnerable. So don't let anyone require anything of you that is not in your best interests, in your heart, and in your mind to offer. Okay. And you know what? It is a solid cultural norm. That whole poppycock, that whole, well, it's the price you pay for the love you had. Okay, put that on a greeting card, please, because That is not meaningful. All right. So while we're being vulnerable, I think we're also going to have to be a little more courageous. Just be quiet when those expectations arrive. All right, because they will. How can you express that in a way that you don't regret? Because you don't need another burden. All right. How can we do that? How can we seek out the companionship while we are rawly ourselves? Okay. And that is to first and foremost just live in that space. Be willing to live in that space. Okay. And fully express as we're comfortable, fully express what we need to express. So there's about 7 minutes left. 7 minutes left. I'm going to go down to the chat box and I'm just going to see who we have. All right, here we are. Yeah, Hafsa says how to carry what can't be fixed. And It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine. Most of these are about, all right, let me have a look. These are all you're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. Are there any questions now? Any things that you're wondering or that you would like to add to this series? Maybe this is not recent grief that you're experiencing, and maybe it really doesn't. Your grief, the grief you feel, isn't really for, in this case, the loss of a loved one. Maybe it's a different kind of grief, a different kind of loss. How many people here, for instance, are afraid of parting with things that belonged to a loved one or belonged to a better time in our life that we miss, all right, we long for? Isn't that grief? It's not of a person, but nobody said grief had to be just about people. It will probably, hopefully in your life, there will be people that you have been blessed to know and had the love and support from that you miss. But I'm not wishing it on you, but I would think that probably is true. If there are any other forms of grief or loss that you would like me to include, please. So one person said the grief is related to wishing I had a better relationship with some people. Grief is for lost time. Wow, that's a profound one. I think that is a very, very, wow. Yeah, let's do a podcast on that. I'm going to start doing research. Then I'll filter it through my experience as a clinician and as a coach and a therapist. And yeah, grief over lost time. Thank you for that. All right. So people say you should just get over the childhood trauma and just let it go. Has anybody ever had anything that even mimicked a traumatic experience and you were successful at just letting it go because it's over? Okay, so generally with a traumatic event, can I assume that trauma in childhood means there was another involved? There was another component, another person, another actor in it. I'm just going to work from that assumption. So the thing about trauma is the search for justice and the search, and I'm not talking about filing charges or legal proceedings. What in your mind might give you a sense of justice, of being seen and heard? There are a number of different ways to start that process for yourself. All right. And the other thing too is how to reintegrate the part of you that got hurt. All right. That had to kind of hide or had to do something that was the what would the term be? Was the active part that suffered the injury. Not all parts of us, okay, got hurt through trauma. And, you know, I speak firsthand with that. Not all parts of us did or do, but we need to find the part of ourself. Sometimes it's the inner child. I do believe we carry with us that inner child. All right. Sometimes it's a matter of speaking the truth and just not backing away from, not being militant, but when you need to, you say the truth and let the chips fall where they may. Sometimes that's not your need. What do you feel? What does that trauma influenced part of you, listen to that and ask that part of yourself. All right. One of the things that from neuro-linguistic programming that I learned to do is to kind of sit quietly. And it's not meditation. It's just sit quietly, no stimulus. So close your eyes, no sounds that you have to attend to, and just ask all parts of myself. All right. Is there any part that needs to be heard? And you can even ask the part of me that actively has a side effect. I won't say a wound. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. A side effect from that event or that kind of ongoing treatment. All right. Okay. What does that part need? And just over time, go back to it and let it come up. And then ask, are the other parts of myself, what do I need to know? All right, what do I need to know? What are your ideas? How can you help this part? And then it kind of promotes, it's like an internal brainstorming, all right? And then you can choose, okay, today, 7th of September, what among those options that from inside me, that were generated inside me, would be the best first step forward? And you know what? It is true that forgiveness sets us free, but premature forgiveness, and forgiveness isn't it was okay, all right, at all. Premature forgiveness abandons us again. So don't buy on for the advice. If we could just get you to forgive, all right, forgiveness happens in its own time, and it happens as a result of work you do to listen to that part of yourself that was injured or afraid or whatever it was, all right? And then all other parts of you go to its aid, go to its loving support. Take care of it, listen to it, and generate this is my best first step option. Yeah, this is true. The grief of watching the world implode can be overwhelming, especially when thinking about what our children will face. And so setting an example for whatever the side effects on us, directly or indirectly, what the only thing, and I remember my father saying this, and lots of other people have said it since, the only thing that makes something even wrong, right, and passable, even passable, is the absence of good people who stand up and say, it's not, I don't accept it. I witness it, I see it, it is not right. All right. So be somebody who first and foremost stands up for yourself, and then for anyone else who you see is suffering or has been falsely, unjustly injured. Okay, we've got 7 new messages. We'll end with that, and then we will. Where are we now? I know, Sarah. Oh my goodness, I know. Grief or gradual loss of someone through dementia. It is gut-wrenching. It is gut-wrenching. I'm going to save all these ideas, and we will do other podcasts on it, because these are as truthful grief and loss, all right, as truthful grief and loss as the death of an actual death of an individual. But they are also just a little bit different, and require slightly different information. All right. But also know this, Sarah, that the grief, that gradual over time loss of a person, I think when you please make an effort to be here on the 21st for Sean Leonard's guest spot, because if I had known or been exposed to a greater vision, a greater picture of grief and loss, and the transitions we go through in life, whatever form of life we're talking about, whatever period of life, I don't think I would have suffered as much over the 10 years that I lost my father to acquired brain injury from stroke, which led to profound dementia. I don't think I would have suffered as much. And so I'm hoping that even that discussion, will it take it away? No, it will not take it away. Nothing's going to take it away. But it may, I don't know, it may give you more strength or more something that I wish I'd had. All right, I wish I'd had through that time, because it was a little like being lost in the wilderness. Who is he today? You know, and who is he not? So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to tell yourself the truth, to be kind and gentle and accepting, and maybe just a little bit more assertive than you are, or that you feel you've got the right to be, about drawing the line in the expectations of whatever culture comes your way, culturally determined grief and loss comes your way, and even close ones who, frankly, put one foot forward and in the wrong place when they ask you to repeat the story, repeat the this, repeat the whatever, or in the inverse, get tired of listening to you process it. Because sometimes you have to say it out loud a lot of times to let it sink in, really sink in, that the loss is true. Okay, it's actual in its physical form. And what I believe is if it is a person, I've come to believe that that person, those people, all of them, all right, are really still with you. The only thing we can't see is we can't see them. We can't touch them. We can't, and we mourn for that. Okay. We'll see you next Wednesday. Take care, everybody.